Hear Me See Me podcast is sponsored by Zenoti, the #1 cloud software for salons and spas. Because when people feel good, they find their greatness. I am Stuart Roberts, and I'm really excited to introduce my new podcast, Hear Me See Me. It's just over 5 years ago. I did something that changed my life. What it did, more than I could have ever realised, it helped me. I have met some absolutely amazing people. Some of the people that work in some of these places, many of them are volunteers, but some of them it is their job. I had this idea after being inspired by a guy in America I'd seen cutting hair on the streets and seeing the difference it made to the guys who were there. This is more than a job, this is a calling. Hello, this is Stuart from Hear Me See Me podcast, and today I've got a very special lady. It's Taban Shoresh from the Lotus Flower charity. Hello, how are you, Taban?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. I've heard a lot about you. We've never met, we've never spoke, but I have heard a lot about you because we've got some mutual friends. And if you could, tell me about yourself and about the Lotus Flower.
Okay, so it's a bit of a journey, and it kind of starts with my history, I guess. So I'm a genocide survivor from Saddam Hussein's era. Right. I was a child political prisoner at the age of 4, and I escaped being buried alive with my family.
You escaped? Sorry.
Being buried alive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I do get that reaction quite a bit. It's a very, very long story, which hopefully one day I'll get down on paper. But we were rescued miraculously, and we managed to escape and went through fleeing. So we spent many months fleeing the war and spent it in hiding as well. And then eventually we were smuggled into Iran for safety. And as soon as we reached Iran, my father was meant to meet us there, but he was poisoned by Saddam Hussein. He'd hired a husband and wife to poison a group of men, and he was one of them. So when we were reunited, basically my dad was poisoned, and Amnesty International had to fly him to the UK to get medical treatment. So we waited a year, and that's how I ended up in the UK at the age of 6 as a refugee. And I'd say we lived a pretty normal life here. I went to school, went to uni, ended up working in the city. And then in August 2014, ISIS had gone into northern Iraq, Kurdistan region, and basically just caused absolute havoc there. The conflict had not only killed many people, but it also displaced like hundreds of thousands of people. So I decided to leave my city job there and go back and work for an organization there. And my first day, we were distributing aid and rescuing people trapped on a mountain, and I mean thousands of people. So that experience was, it stayed with me forever. And for the next 15 months, we spent it building camps, with building schools, doing lots of aid distributions. So it was very, very frontline. And I got to work quite closely with the Yazidi women who'd been impacted. And they were the ones who were taken by ISIS, raped, sold on as sex slaves. And so when they were rescued, they were coming back to the camps, and because journalists wanted to interview them, I would support in finding suitable women and just make sure that the stories were covered ethically and the women were protected. So through that kind of work, I got to work quite closely with the women. And when I came back to the UK in November 2015, it was I came back in a bit of a shock in terms of what I'd experienced. So it took me some time to compose myself again and just kind of come over what had happened. But I knew one thing, and that was I needed to do something to help, even if it was from here. So I decided to set up the Lotus Flower in March 2016. And I set it up in my living room, same living room, and set it up with no money whatsoever. But we had a project that we wanted to implement because we'd already asked the women on the ground. So we did an assessment and asked what kind of projects they wanted. So we managed to fundraise £25,000 for that project. And from there, so since March 2016 to now, it's just grown and grown and grown. And that kind of shows the need for the support, especially for women and girls inside camps. And, you know, so now we have 3 centres in 3 refugee camps in the region, but we operate in more camps as well. We've managed to help 26,000 women and girls to date. We've implemented over 30 projects, and it's just been growing and growing. Like it's phenomenal to see it grow in that way, but also to see the lives that we're changing. So that's the short version of the story.
I'm lost for words. You know, like it's so heartbreaking. You know that what you're saying, and it's the story. See, these stories are so crucial to get people to understand the plight of refugees and to understand what it's like in camps and things. That the need is there, and you know, women being raped, being put into sex slavery, and all of those things. It's just horrific. As a father, I've got 4 girls. I've got 2 granddaughters. You know. I can't begin to understand what it must be like for a parent to have that happen to those children, or for a child for that happen to their mother, and these things. I think that what you're doing is amazing. I think what it is. It's floored me a little bit. I knew what we were going to talk about, but it's floored me. So we both got to know each other through. I've got a family member, Greg, and his partner, Kathy. It's amazing what they told me. But tell me about how you come to meet those and what happened with that.
I mean, that is such a phenomenal story. So in terms of how that came about, so going back to the Yazidi women that were taken, raped and sold on as sex slaves, because I'd been working in the region, and in 2016 I went to visit a group of it's like an army force, Peshmerga, so a specific army force that was created for these women. Now, Kurdish women in our history, we've always had Peshmerga, so we've always had fighters and army, you know, like soldiers. So it's nothing new to us, but it was very interesting for me because I wanted to know why they'd set up this specific one for Yazidi women. And when I went to visit them, they were training like you would in any military force. And I was speaking to one of the commanders, and they said, actually, this, not only do they have the freedom to go and fight, we train them as well, but actually this is more of a mechanism to let their anger out, because they have so many emotions that are stuck inside of them because of what they've experienced. This is an avenue for them to release that. Now that stuck with me forever. And I thought, well, I'm working with the same women. I'm a charity. I can't do anything with, military or armed forces, but what can we use that will support them in helping them channel their emotions, but also build their confidence to start rebuilding that self and that identity. Also something that's good for their health and mental health. So boxing came up, and I thought, oh, this is a great idea. But boxing doesn't exist in the region really for women. So I thought, oh, okay, right, we might be up for how's this going to work? Now, because we're so close to the culture and we're so close to the community, we almost work at their speed instead of us going, right, this is what you need to do and that's it. We work with them and we know when's the right timing for something. So it actually took, 2016, when did we implement? We went out last year. So it took a good 2 to 3 years for us to actually implement it, because that's the time frame that was needed for us to go, okay, now is the right time to do it.
Yeah.
And we were introduced to Kathy, and she found out about the project and she absolutely loved it. And the idea was to use Kathy, Greg and Boxology to be the trainers that train our women to become boxing instructors for the rest of the women.
Yeah.
And so it just all made sense. All the elements came in. You know, Kathy and Greg are very, very supportive of mental health, and, you know, they bring that into the boxing as well. So it's like a marriage made in heaven. So I thought, this is perfect, and proposed that they would support the project and come out and do train the women. And so they came out, and they went out last year, and I'm pretty sure it was like nothing that they'd experienced before on so many levels. I think firstly, you know, what we see of Iraq or northern Iraq is just conflict. And, you know, there's always been conflict there, but actually the northern part is quite safe. It's not super safe, but it's very, very safe. Like, the security forces there are very good. And so I had no worries for them to go out there, but always said, you know, this is completely up to you. You know, I can't guarantee anyone's safety for anything. But when they went out there, they realized that it's nothing like what they see on the news, and it's nothing like what is projected in the world. Like, and we've had that feedback from everyone. The moment you step in Kurdistan, you realize it's actually nothing like what you see on the news. Yeah. So that was the first experience of the region. And then when they went out to visit the women and girls, I think that just blew them away, because it made them closer to the actual stories. And some of the stories are so horrific. Like you said, you've got daughters, and we have women who had their daughters at the age of 7 taken and raped by 6 different men and sold on in the moment of 3 years. So they were working with these kind of women, and for them it was very, very difficult. And for the first time to actually be face to face with that and put a real person to it, I think it was very emotional for them. For me, it's always emotional for me, but I've almost experienced a lot in my past. I've strangely, this is the norm. Like, I've experienced it as a child. I was born into conflict. I've seen conflict. I've fled from conflict. So you're kind of prepared for those things. So it's not a massive shock in that way. But I think for Kathy and Greg, it's the first time that they'd encountered something like that. So it became very, very, very real. And they automatically connected with all the women. And they carried out their training sessions. The women absolutely loved it. And we still continue today. I mean, COVID's got in the way a little bit, but it still carries on, and they love it. And you can see the change in the women, the confidence, the mental health, the rebuilding, the channeling of energy. It's phenomenal to watch.
It was a great idea as well to not go out and teach a few people how to box, was to go out and teach a few people how to train the boxing to then pass on. It's that sort of give a man a fish, or teach him how to fish, you'll eat the rest of his life. It's that, that's something that can continue and grow. And with it, I mean, I've got a background of martial arts, and I've got, follow a lot of martial arts. And the thing always about it is the discipline, the camaraderie, the self-belief, the self-esteem. It raises all of those things, So it's the perfect. You found the perfect thing, and you found the perfect people, because Kathy and Greg, as you say, they're not pure boxing. It's boxology. is all about the other side, the soft and the hard, and the physical and the mental. So they were really what you couldn't have found better. I've had Kathy on my podcast, so her stories marries so perfectly.
Yeah,
what we're doing.
Completely. And she shared, and that created a connection with the women. You know, she shared her story, and they really, really, really connected. And like you said, and the Lotus Flower, we are all about that. We're all about teaching the skills and giving the tools rather than just giving something and then taking it away. So in all our projects, we try and make sure that we leave that kind of stamp on it. And I knew that, you know, we couldn't find women boxing instructors to teach the women. So we knew that we had to train women to teach them.
Yeah. Because is it that thing of, I know when I'm doing haircuts for homeless, sometimes that sometimes in some religions and cultures that they can only work with a woman. Is that the case? Is it they can't? So
I'd say it's still a pretty conservative society. I mean, it's moved on a lot. Like from my generation, it's moved on so much. So many things have changed. You know, when I was a teenager and I'd go and visit back, you didn't see women driving. You didn't see like really, really simple things. But now, you know, you've got women working, you've got women driving, and you do have women in sports and all sorts of things. But you do still have pockets of the community that are still very conservative. And the ones that we work with are conservative. They're from like rural areas. And so, and that's why our centres work, because it is women and girls centres. And therefore the families trust the centres and they fully trust the centres. And so having a women instructor there just builds that trust even more. There's no point in me trying to go and change a complete culture overnight. It's not going to happen. You kind of introduce things slowly and, you know, they become accepting of it. And so, and that's why it was a massive, massive success, is because we took that into account. To start with, we didn't have a woman boxing instructor or martial arts expert. So we had to, because we wanted to get them in the mood of training before Kathy and Greg arrived. So we hired someone who was, I think it was kickboxing, but it was a guy, but that guy knew that community. So he was accepted by them because they knew him. So there are small things that we take into consideration, which actually have a massive impact. And so the way that we worked around it, I think, has been perfect. Yeah.
I mean, we've had to take it account with what we do sometimes, that generally, like a homeless centre is pretty much open, it is as it is. But we sometimes go to women's refuges, and then there's sometimes people of the Muslim faith, and we set up screen. So if I am there, they put the screen up because it's really not good for, you know, I shouldn't be seeing that lady.
Yeah,
I shouldn't be seeing her. So but I think they're so glad that we're respectful of that.
Yeah,
it's even the people that aren't involved now, they like the fact that we've respected that, and you know, it's all about building trust, isn't it?
That's completely it. That's completely it. And actually, the way that Kathy and Greg just kind of hugged the culture was phenomenal, because you know, especially Kurdish people, we absolutely love anyone that embraces our culture. So we kind of welcome them, and they loved everything about it. And so I think they got that back in return as well. But definitely it's all about building trust and kind of respecting it. You know, I'm not going to change. I don't expect anyone to be like me. I'm not going to change anyone overnight. So all I can do is respect the way that they're doing things and try and work around that. And that's what we try and do.
So it obviously came to an abrupt halt, didn't it, this year? Everything has. How has it affected your charity then from when it stopped in March?
So COVID has blown everything out the water, but actually with us, we've managed to cope around it in that. So we were forced. So when COVID first happened, our staff went out in the camps and they did hygiene distribution kits and then hygiene awareness, especially with the kids, on how to wash your hands and stay clean. And then our sewing sisters made masks for those in the camps. So we kind of adapted quite quickly, and then it was full lockdown. So nobody could come out of the camps, nobody could come into the camps, nobody could leave their homes. You know, the region had military out, so you couldn't go out. And from that, we had to think of how we could still access the community. And we're very lucky because we hire community outreach workers in the camps. Right. So I think we're one of the few organizations that do that, because we know that if we hire from within the camp, not only do you have people that's connected to the camp, but in this situation, it highlighted that we could continue some of our projects. And what we did was we took things remotely. So we did our awareness sessions remotely. We did, our psychologist was available remotely. And then after, when lockdown was eased off a little bit, we did a COVID assessment to see what the impact was and what the needs were. And mental health was massively impacted across all the camps. So it's good that we had our psychologist there. The other, what else? Human trafficking, early marriage, gender-based violence, all these things just increased, and suicide rates, it just increased. So thankfully for us being there, carrying out those, the remote work was so desperately needed. And so we continued. But then another impact was that the funding pool had dropped for us. So, and many charities faced this. We had donors drop left, right, and centre, and we were just left with this massive gap of funding pool. And we didn't know how to fill it because, you know, everyone's applying for the same thing. You've got local, international donors that have left because they can't be there. And so we're still having to support and provide the services, but we don't have the funding coming in. So it really, really impacted our funding. And so we launched an appeal, and we were on the brink of closing, but thankfully we've kind of saved ourselves, but we still need to kind of fundraise to continue and make sure that never happens again. So COVID has had its impact on different levels, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, because we understand from our own charity that we've been going 6 years next month, and we've only really this last year or two got to the point where, you know, we've become a registered charity and we're growing. We were growing until March. But the thing is up until this point, it's that it's getting funding in to keep moving. But ideally, you need to get larger funding so that you can plan for the future. Because if you can get some sort of substantial funding in place, you can then start to do a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. But when it's a little bit like month to month, year to year, you know, and some parts of funds that come in that people don't realise that you have to use in a certain time. And so it's very difficult to have a long-term plan when you're reliant upon funds. I don't know if you find that.
Completely. And also there's another element to it. Like, you know, some donors just want to fund projects. The projects don't run on their own. They run with the organisation. Without the organisation, the project does not run. No. And so that's another thing. But also, as you and I, we're implementers. We're direct implementers. We are the ones that do the work on the ground. Yeah. And so what happens is we've realised that you have, you know, governments that say, hey, we're gonna put $1 million aside for education. And so they put $1 million aside. Then they choose a big international charity to give that $1 million to. And so the $1 million goes there. And then that $1 million for that big charity, actually half of it's just spent on, I'd say, waste. And then what happens is local or direct implementers have to compete for about 50,000. And you're going, but hold on. That was $1 million. How's that got to 50,000? And we're now all fighting to try and get this 50,000.
50,
so I think the funding mechanisms need to be updated and realised. And I hope people do start supporting direct implementers, because we're the ones doing the work. We've almost got a middleman there that we don't really need. And so it's a bit of a challenge. It's a massive challenge. And I know that we're not the only ones facing that. So I really do hope, you know, all smaller charities get through COVID, because from what I've seen, they are the hands-on direct implementers. And without them, not much would happen.
No, of course. And so I obviously, when they came back, I spoke to Kathy and Greg about the project that they did. And I sort of straight away, I said, oh, look, I'll come out there with you. Next time you go, I've got to come. And, and then they said, well, we landed here and then we had to get jeeps there and then we had to get an armed escort there. And I started to backtrack a little bit. I was like, oh, I don't know about that. But in all seriousness, I think it'd be great to come when they do finally get to come back. It would be great to do something, maybe I could bring, because we've got another arm that we're building, that we're doing education for homeless people. So teaching people to cut hair. And it's something that is universal, that obviously not a full-blown level 3 education, but even if we can get a basic level of education for hairdressing.
We do have, so we've got a project called Hairdressing Sisters that we've been trying to launch. And basically my hairdresser, he's trying to come out to do that kind of teaching. So it's something that we could partner up on. And honestly, if you come out, and I think it's a phenomenal thing to kind of be part of teaching someone a skill that that you've left, that they'll be able to earn an income in. So that, I think, is phenomenal, and it is something that we have thought about. We've always so planned. COVID got in the way, but no, absolutely would love for you to join us and just come out there, and we could definitely do something around that. And they love it. They really do. They want to learn these skills.
The great thing is I've built up great contacts with the industry over the last few years. So that if I did come, I could bring equipment as well. So I could bring,
brilliant.
Yeah, I could bring scissors and lots and lots of stuff.
Amazing.
So that we could leaving the tools of the trade, leave that behind.
That would be phenomenal. That would be absolutely phenomenal. Let's talk about that. I'm excited. I just want COVID to go.
I know it's got in the way. We was on such a crest, we was flying, and it just took the sails, it took the feet from under us, because we had like a documentary being made, and we was having a big launch. I was getting a bit full of myself, actually. So maybe the power above said to me, like, you're getting a bit full of yourself, mate. You need to come. I don't think the whole of pandemic was just to take away my ego, but it was just, when you think you pinch me, it's all going a bit too well at the moment. And then, for us, as you could manage to carry on for a bit, we just literally down tools overnight. So we'd had 5 years solid work of building from me on my own to 67 projects across the UK, to 600 volunteers. We'd given out 40,000 haircuts, and then all of a sudden it just stopped overnight, and I naively said, oh, well, we'll just get going again when it passes. But the reality now is that we're having to open everyone again almost from scratch. I've got to go individually and get them going again. And as we open one, one pops up and another one closes, because we just, I think I've just had a message just before I come online with you from my poor lady in the north, she's opened 10 projects around Manchester, and they're just, as fast as they're opening, they're closing again. But the important thing is that we move forward, because we're going to keep getting this. The next year we're going to get knocked back and knocked back and knocked back, but we've got to rejoice in every victory, haven't we?
Completely. And it's also figuring out are there ways to work around it? Like, I know in your industry it's been massively, massively hit, massively hit. And so I do hope the government figures out a way to support. I feel like the support has been lacking. There's been a lot of you can't do this and you can't do that, but the actual support has been lacking. And if something like this is going to happen again, then we need to know how we can operate around it. I guess for our services, we can do most things remotely, but again, we can't do most things remotely as well. A lot of our centres are reliant on the women coming to the centres. We've got a lot of businesses that we've supported and set up in the camps. They've all had to close overnight, and so they've been impacted. So it really is, we have to kind of figure out a way of planning ahead of, okay, well, if this happens again, what do we do? And then sometimes as hard as it is, we just have to surrender and go, actually, there's nothing much I can do, which is what I had to do at the start. I had to just go, if we are going to close, then there's nothing I can do. There's literally nothing else I can do in my power. But then miracles happen. So have faith, keep the faith, and keep moving forward. It's one step in front of the other, and magic happens with that.
Yeah. I mean, do you find, I mean, you gave me a very short story of your upbringing and that, but I don't know, mine has been nowhere near like yours. You know, I suffered from sexual abuse when I was a kid, and I went into addictions as I was older, and all of these things. But my salvation has been helping other people. Yeah. So is this what drives you? Because you know, from that background, and you understand. Is this your sort of antidote?
So I would say, and I've experienced a lot of trauma, which includes abuse as well. And the only way my head will accept any of it is there's a reason why I've had to go through all this pain. There's absolutely no way that I'm put on this world for me to experience all of that and then for nothing to happen. Like that's how my brain's accepted it, is actually you've gone through all this pain. You now need to figure out how to turn it into a purpose. And then now that's your power. So it's that formula that I work by, and it's very healing to know that you're impacting the lives of others and supporting other people. I've done a lot of healing on myself to be able to get to that point where I can work with anyone that's gone through any kind of trauma where I'm not triggered. So you have to have your healing in place, your mechanisms and tools in place to support you. And the support that you need is continuous. Like, it's not like we're going to wake up one night and that's it, all our traumas are gone. It doesn't happen like that. It's learning to sit with it, learning to heal, and learning to know, as hard as it is, that happened for some sort of purpose.
Yeah.
Like not many people in this world can cope with trauma and pain. And if you notice, most people that have gone through trauma and pain, they're doing something phenomenal by helping others.
Yeah.
So that's how my brain equates it. I don't know.
I fully get that. That's exactly the same for me. It had a hold over me for so many years, you know, and it wasn't until I was at the age of 44 when I took my last drink and my last drug. And it's actually through the recovery process that then I finally accepted that it was something, but it didn't identify me anymore. That wasn't me anymore, you know. Yeah. If I'm always brutally honest with myself, I'd used that as an excuse for many, many years, because it was, I'd see a therapist or a counsellor or a psychologist or get myself out of trouble because I've got myself into trouble, and it would be, after a short period, it would be, oh, poor thing. No wonder he drinks. No wonder he takes drugs and all that. And it becomes a tool. And you end up sort of, but all the time you're letting that happen to you. You're letting that take control, and you're almost letting it happen to you again and again and again. Mm-hmm. And it's not until you finally let go. And, you know, I find forgiveness is such a powerful thing. They say, you know, to err is human, to forgive is divine. And I think that really means is that it's the most, when you forgive what's happened to you or you forgive someone else, you really are blessing yourself. That's what really happens. You're completely letting go at that point. When you can truly forgive, you let go, and the power of that goes, and the power within you rises, you know.
Completely. And also forgiveness. And I've noticed, like, over the years of doing all the healing work, forgiving yourself, we forget to forgive ourselves. You know, we forget to forgive ourselves for not speaking up when that thing was happening to us, or not stopping that thing when that thing was happening to us. And that is crucial. Actually, before forgiving anyone else, you need to forgive yourself, because when you start putting the focus back on you, and actually something magical happens. And of course you forgive others, but in a way, forgiving others, for some really horrible things that people do to you, it is actually unforgivable. That's why the word is unforgivable, right? But for you to have the power to forgive that person, it's not just letting that situation go from your identity and attachment, but it's also freeing yourself. You're out of that prison. And like you said, it takes a hold over you. And I think for me, when I started realizing all of this, the decision was really, really clear for me. I thought, am I going to let my past control me? No. Therefore, I make a completely different future. And that's what I've done. So I thought I can continue that way, or I can stop, make a change, and just create a completely different future. And that means breaking a lot of cycles, means breaking a lot of patterns. It means breaking barriers in my culture. It means breaking so many things, but also the most important thing that you're breaking is you're breaking your old identity. And that's quite hard to do. That's a really hard thing to do. But I do believe that, and I genuinely believe that people that have experienced pain or extreme pain in this world are here to heal others. You've just got that gift in you, because something so wrong has happened to you. You would never want that to happen to somebody else. Therefore, you turn that around in a way where you can stop anything from happening to somebody else. But you also have to remember yourself. So it can be very easy to get into the cycle of giving, and which is important. But in that, with trauma, there's a part of trauma where we kind of learn to give because we're missing something in ourselves. We weren't given something. Most of the time it's the love that we should have had. So we're always giving to seek that love. So it's really important to kind of understand and break that and go, no, I'm not giving because I want love. I'm giving wholeheartedly, unconditionally. And I'm also going to give to myself. So we're going deep now.
Well, it's worthwhile, isn't it? I mean, it's like, because the thing is, I forget I'm doing this stuff, and to me, I'm just chatting to new people all the time. And I love people. I find people fascinating. And especially someone like yourself who what's interesting to me as well is that not only have you gone against your past, you've broken those chains of your former identity and created your own new future. That's inspiring itself. But also, as you said, you've broken some boundaries of your own culture. And that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, my divorce was one. I think over time, it's got a lot better. Like the taboos in my culture have got better, but they're still there at times. But I've managed to somehow detach myself from it because I'm very true to what I'm doing. I've realized this is my truth. This is what I'm doing, and this is what I believe in. And I have full confidence in myself and respect in myself to be able to do that. Just to kind of give you an example, I won't forget that when I was out in Kurdistan, we were on Mount Sinjar, and because it was a military operation, it was still it's quite dangerous. So we were going into territory where I could see the bombs dropping. Literally, It wasn't far. It was very dangerous. And on Mount Sinjar is where when the Peshmergas, our soldiers, had caught the region, they kind of took over the whole mountain, and it was full of men. Now we have female Peshmergas who are fighters, but when you're a female Peshmerga, they just go, right, you're one of the guys.
Yeah.
And then outside of that context, they don't see many women going into situations like that. So in that particular situation, I remember sitting with the mayor, because I'd gone with my team and I was the only woman there, or the only Kurdish woman that wasn't a Peshmerga. And he sat down and said, I have so much respect for your family for allowing you to come out here with all these men and just, you know, be trapped here overnight, and there's a war going on there. And, you know, they must have so much faith and confidence in you. And I really respected him for saying that, because I've never heard it from anyone else. And I've always thought, what is it that allows me to do that? But it's knowing my truth. Like, there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing, and I wholeheartedly believe that. And I will sit there and confront that with my family, and they know it's true, therefore they have nothing to say. So I think being in that truth, and when you're not doing anything wrong, there's not much many people can say. And so I've carried that, and that's helped, I'd say, break those boundaries. And, you know, even now, I think that attitude has allowed me to have male friendships in my culture. You know, there are male friendships with other women and guys and stuff, whereas in certain regions it's quite restricted. But I've never faced those taboos. I think leaving my divorce was a massive taboo, but, you know, it wasn't the best marriage. It was abusive, and I walked away, and I walked away at a time when it was a taboo, so you didn't get that support. But even then, I was like, something wrong is happening here. I'm not going to put up with it anymore.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely just sitting in your truth and knowing that you're wholeheartedly right in what you're doing. And so when you do that, some people accept it and some people don't.
And what's the wonderful thing is that there are people in that same situation that are held or bound by that, you know, restriction, that then see that as an example of hope. You know, you doing that and other women doing that, it's what, like, you don't have to put up with this. There's things you don't have to put up with in this life.
Completely. I think there's a beauty in storytelling, and so I'm looking to create a podcast soon, and I'm looking for people's aha moments. I'd love to have you on to figure out what your aha moment was. And that is, you know, what was that moment that kind of triggered all of this? And there's a beauty in stories and inspiring other people and making them realize. I think recently I spoke about my marriage and what happened, and a few women reached out to me and said, oh, I didn't know that's happened to you. That's happened to me, but I've never been able to say. And so it's that power of sharing. When you see somebody else has gone through it, it almost puts you at ease, not because they've gone through it, but because you're not the only one.
Well, when you do it, I'll be glad to, because I owe you one.
Oh, I'd love to have you on.
I've got to return the favour.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've had quite a few aha moments, you know. So.
Well, that's going to be a beautiful a story to share. I get so fascinated by them, because I don't think, you know, I think everyone has them, but some people ignore it.
Yeah. And
that's the thing. It's, you know, the ones that don't ignore it end up doing stuff with it, which is beautiful. And so, yeah, definitely we'll have you on there for that.
Well, I think as well, it's all about action, because if you don't take action quick enough, I mean, this has been my story, that if you don't take action quick enough, you quickly, your mind will deceive you into thinking, oh, it isn't like that. So it's how quickly you take action on things, you know. True. Everything's wonderful. My favourite saying is, God can move mountains, but you're best to bring a shovel. Because, yeah, I love that, because it is. I've got faith that everything will be better. I've got faith that in the long run we'll succeed. But, you know, we've got to roll our sleeves up. You know, we can't just stand back, and we can't just have ideals and that. We've got to be strong enough to live those ideals as well, as you are. You know, you've got to live what you believe in.
Completely. And that's action is key. I think action is key. And that's how the Lotus Flower started. You know, it suddenly came up as an idea. I knew exactly why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And if I let my brain think over it too much, I would have thought, I have no money. There's no way I can do this. I'm here, they're there. Like, I would have thought of a million reasons why I couldn't. But instead, I sat in this living room, put some Post-its, like papers up, planned it out roughly, and went and registered. Literally went, right, I'm registering. Because if I don't register, I'm not going to do it. So I registered and then went, oh, I have to do it now.
Yeah. We think so, like, because that exactly what I've done in the past with things. And it's like, once I got a little bit of momentum with the homeless, and I was... well, I'm going to launch in Leeds, you know, and it's I wouldn't work out. I'd sort of say, right, in May we're opening in Leeds, and then I'd work backwards, you know. Then I'd find a venue, then I'd find a team leader, then, you know. But it happens if you put pressure on you, like positive pressure. I think is
definitely positive pressure. I think recently I've been under quite a lot of pressure, but I also know when to step back.
Yeah.
So it's very important to know and listen to yourself and know exactly when, okay, if anything's going to work, you need to be working before it. So you have to kind of step back and tend to your needs. But I do work well under pressure.
Yeah. I do myself. I think it spurs me on a little bit, you know, I like a challenge. But as you say, it's also, and it comes back to the forgiveness part, that it's realising when, right, some of this is out of my hands. You know, like I try to control a pandemic. I'm that egotistical. You know, then I went, hang on a minute, Stuart. You know, like you just go where you can go, and if you can't go, like we were supposed to go to Liverpool this weekend for a launch, and you know we picked that right, but I'm back at the Whitechapel Mission tomorrow. So as long as I can go somewhere and do what I love doing and help some people, in the long term, we'll be fine. We'll be back out there and we'll be doing what we do.
Yeah, 100%. I think definitely have the faith and the hope. And that's another thing. I kind of, when we were on the brink of closing, I just surrendered and went, we're doing something good here. If you want us to continue, then help us out here. I don't know who I was asking for help. Yeah. Went, dear universe, I'm sending it out there. We are doing something phenomenal. We're changing lives. Yeah. We're on the brink of closing. So if you want us to kind of stay alive, you need to open some doors. And the doors opened. So there's a magic in asking.
Yeah. It is. I've done it so many times. And I think that's where faith comes in, that, you know, it doesn't matter, as you say, it doesn't matter who you're asking, but you've got to ask, you know, you've got to ask that question. Because what it is, it's taking it away from you. It's taking that control away from you, because sometimes you haven't got the answers. They have to come from elsewhere. And they do come. Once you stop talking and start listening, you start to get answers.
Completely. Yeah, we're definitely on the same wavelength, Stuart.
Yeah. But I've known you for years. It's the first time we've ever spoken. It's funny, isn't it? When you do get introduced to people like that. So for the future, what do you really need for the future for the Lotus project?
I think we need to continue fundraising to help us continue going. I would say I need to focus on building future funding as well, because I never want to be in this position again. Yeah. And I think, as you know, we have to stop and pat ourselves on the back and say, you know, you started this from nothing. You've got it to where it is. Yeah. And now it's growing. Need to have more hands in to help. So we're at that stage. I think we would love to continue our projects. You know, hopefully this global pandemic thing will go and we'll continue our projects on the grounds are centres will be open again. Kathy and Greg can come out. You guys can come out.
Yeah.
That's what we're all about, is continuing those projects where it's most needed, because we're working with a community that's very much forgotten. When it's in the headlines and when it's in the media, everyone knows about it. Yeah. But when it's gone, you forget that there are people living in camps. There are people that live in a tent. There are people that live in a cabin, and they've been living there for years and years and years. Yeah. And it could be like 10 people in a tent. And what we're trying to do is make life as easy as possible while they're there. Yeah. By helping them build skills that they'll be able to use in the camps, but even once they leave. Yeah,
it's crucial, because what happens is, it's a bit like us with our projects and with the homeless situation in Britain, is it's almost like it comes out for Christmas. Everyone does this, all this, and it's. I'm not knocking it. I think it's great. Everyone does, at least come together at that time, but it's all year round. It's when the light stops shining. That's when the work needs to really be done, because it's easy to get stuff done at those times. So as you say, it's important for that work to carry on when the light isn't shining on your projects.
Completely. It's the most critical time, I'd say.
Yeah.
And we try and do our best to shine the light on it as much as we can, but there needs to be support on a larger scale, I'd say, as well.
Well, what I'll do at the end, I will put all the links on there. You're
amazing. Thank you.
We put all the links on. I'm fascinated by it all. I'm sure that when Greg and Kathy go out there, that I can come along. Obviously, you guys are already getting it started, so don't want to take over, but I'm happy to help. I'm happy to support.
Yeah, we'll work something out.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to support in that. And hopefully next year we can get out there. And at some point, I'd love to meet you in person, have a cup of coffee, and
Definitely. I know, right? Once all this is over, we can go out of our houses. I don't even know what the rules are now. I've lost track.
I just check on a daily basis, one day at a time.
Yeah. Hopefully we will meet. Thank you so much, Stuart.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and you take care and keep in touch.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Just over 5 years ago, I did something that changed my life. What it did, more than I could have ever realised, it helped me. I have met some absolutely amazing people. Some of the people that work in some of these places, many of them are volunteers, but some of them, it is their job. This is more than a job. This is a calling.